The following presentation is part of the Technology and the Corporation Conference Series, sponsored by MIT's Industrial Liaison Program.
Is there anyone that would like to start us off with a question? Yeah, please.
Actually, I have a question for Barcelona. So looking at the Seattle data, you have a lot of data. Do you have that same ability in Europe to collect that data, or is it different?
We actually have the data. Yeah. Of course, yes, we have. And actually, there, as he was mentioning, there are different companies that are able to collect those data. So the point now is how we analyze those data, and as he was explaining, what are those data for, and how you deal with those data from a tactical perspective, because you have objective data, but what is the implication from a tactical perspective? I don't know whether you want to add some.
So I guess one of the questions that I have is in some of our work working with clinicians or people in the military, we find that when you start asking people a question up front in kind of an interview format, they tell you one response, but there's kind of an abstraction to what they're saying, that they actually miss some of the details, where if you actually show them videos or you show them actual performance and you ask them to comment on that performance, you actually get a very different answer in what they were looking for and what they were expecting. And we saw this with some of our work with the soldiers looking at agility, where we said, well, what do you want us to measure for their agility when they're wearing this different gear? And they gave us one set of answers, but then when we actually showed videos and we said, what about this performance or this performer would you quantify as making them agile? How would you describe agility in terms of what you're seeing here? We got a totally different set of, not totally different, but we got a more refined set of information for which we could make metrics. And so I see some of the video like what you're showing, and you actually have the opportunity now to go to the coaches and say, well, what is it explicitly that you're looking for? What metrics are actually related to what you want to say? And I think there's a lot of potential when you have that kind of information now to say, well, what is the decision I want to make, and how can I use these measures to quantify those particular points of information? There's a question behind you.
I'm so sorry, I forgot your name. From 3 Sigma, my fault. So I think it's awesome that you've quantified all those different movements, and you've created kind of formulas and build-outs for them. But Juke and Loop, I mean, they're not super random. So what are you finding with that data? Because it seems as though there's really only two responses, and that's either clockwise or counterclockwise for one, or left or right for the other. So I'm just curious as to what you find.
Yeah, great question. So I think there's a huge space of responses that we haven't explored yet. Part of it is, even though we've reduced it down to 7 parameters is still a lot of parameters. And also the relative location on the field can also change the response. Like if you're near a corner or if you're in front of the goal. So I wouldn't want to put a number on your question yet, but I think that's something we want to look into. And I think to really get a handle on it, we need exactly the data that you just showed. So I'm really excited about that. Can I ask one more? Oh, no.
That question to the person from Seattle and Barcelona. Do you guys do any training, a way to prevent or identify at-risk players? That way you don't have to, wait around those players who injured out for a couple of months. If you guys do have, I'd like to know how you guys do it.
Yeah. Couple ways. I think there's the heaviest demands of the week are always the game. It's one of the most important things you need to do is set up a structure where you're measuring every player's response to this match load. And then everyone's match load response is individualized. We also obviously have the running loads too, so we can tell Was it heavier game versus lighter game? Clearly, the research is implying that subjective wellness scores can be just as reliable and valid as some of the objective data we collect with that. And then it's using GPS, heart rate. Our players wear GPS and heart rate every day in training to really look at some of the neuromuscular loads and then metabolic response to see how guys are coping with the training week. I mean, the interesting thing is, we've done some injury prediction modeling in the past that we've actually got away from for the reason that I stated, and that the coaches, they just don't. If I say to the coach, and we had some pretty good models to say, Coach, I think this guy's got about an 18% injury risk for the next 2 weeks. But coaches, that doesn't resonate with them. So we've really had to almost simplify this green, yellow, red heuristics type model of some rules of thumb. If guys do this or guys do that or guys respond like that, well, then they're altered training. And we've had a lot of success with that. So.
Yeah, we are going in the direction of personalized training. So and part of it is mainly based on probability of injuries. So yes, definitely, we are moving in the direction of very, very personalized, based on many different factors. And one of those factors is kind of broad probability of injury of the player. And obviously, as he was mentioning, depending on the session and how close you are to the game, the training sessions are completely different.
And one thing that they're doing it in American football. They have sensors that actually Zebra put, and if they detect a concussion, they say, okay, you need to rest for 3 weeks. And that way they let the concussion fix itself and they remove the concussion problem. And in discussions with Barcelona, that's what they're trying to do. So if there's a mini injury, if you can model a player and the strainer of a player, then you can see how much the player has to rest so that it recovers to extend the life of the player. So they're trying, I think, to do this to extend the life of Messi. When does Messi need to rest? Yeah.
You had a question.
I do.
Do you still have it?
I do. Yeah, I do. I have one for Maurici. That's a great talk. I love the BZ analogy. It was terrific. When you switch the focus so you have one agent and everything else is environment, when the ball moves around, your agent is always switching. So are you assuming that all of the agents are interchangeable, or are there parameters that are associated with different agents?
No, they are. Yes, they are interchangeable. So the thing is that the ball, it doesn't move itself. So you need the player actually that makes the ball move. And here, the move, it was to highlight the importance of the ball at all levels of the system. And here, what I was defining is the scale at which we want to understand problems. And therefore, you define the agent as that person that is in possession of the ball at that moment in time. But notice that the environment, it's a higher order environment. It's not at the same scale. But since the ball goes across all levels of the system, that's the move that I was trying to explain there. Yeah.
I have a question regarding performance metrics. So at some point, one of the speakers, said, "Okay, this is a scoring opportunity," but then it was actually a goal because whatever the shooter was missing, and he ended up scoring, right? But at the end of the day, maybe just generating that opportunity was good enough, right? So, so if ideally you want to win, okay, but maybe measuring that is not the best. So when applying these different procedures, what do you take as a performance metric, as a metric of success? More goals, more shots, but then shots have different qualities. So how do you measure that?
So let me try to answer it from my perspective, the question. The point is that part of the key to any kind of analysis is identifying what are the, quote, relevant parameters. What are the things that actually determine how you're going to be able to do, even if in a particular case it goes in a different way. And the concept of understanding relevant parameters is formally founded in the context of complex system science by understanding how the system aggregates, how the behavior of the system aggregates the larger scale. So if you want to understand the behavior over an entire game across all of the players, we have to understand how to aggregate. If you look at individual pieces of information, you don't have the ability to identify what is the real relevant parameters. So people today generally use intuition, and that's what has been talked about. How do people tell you what they want? And what you're relying upon is human intuition about what's important in the game. So we try to go beyond the current ability of intuition to understand these things by doing it formally.
At the Barcelona Sports Tech conference last year, they had a fantastic roundtable on positional data. And I think Daniel Memmert, who's the head professor for the Sport University of Cologne, who basically trains all the performance analysts for the German Federation. And they have obviously done hundreds of games with the XY positional data. And in his talk, he kind of talked through all their research they've done where these traditional KPIs around success in football were, okay, distance covered, passing percentage, and duels won. And he says, okay, once we view the game and we actually see the interaction of the players, what's going on, we find they're not really reliable KPIs. And I mean, as of last year, he said all the research they've been seeing from all their positional data, that their new KPIs were the ability to dominate space, right? Make the space small when you're defending, large when you're attacking. The ability to continue to be able to press the opponent at high velocity when the opponent has the ball. And when you have the ball, the ability to bypass players on the opposition team with your passes. So if I'm eliminating players with passes through the opposition. I mean, they've created a whole new metric, called packing in Germany, where you look at the quality of the passes by how many players you bypass with your pass. Because you can have 95% passing percentage, but if every pass is backwards, you're not actually doing anything to the opponent. It doesn't matter. And so that was kind of the best explanation I had heard of, like, if you're looking at current positional data research, what the trend for success seems to be.
So I haven't done this in soccer, but we have done it in basketball. And in basketball, they do exactly what you said, which is that an open, uncontested mid-range shot that happens to miss is worth more than a contested three-point shot that happens to go in, right? So, and I think part of that you just have to get by talking to the coaches and understanding the game, what is most valuable to them.
Let's see if I can articulate this properly. I think that at the level that we are looking at the parameters, I think it's not the proper level. So we should understand that a system or a game of soccer, it implies a lot of intentional systems, intentional and epistemic systems. So if you try to understand how a player is going to move, what you need is actually the physical relations. He was saying coaches look for the interactions. And we as scientists, we need to look for the physical relations, for those interactions. But what we actually need to understand is how we can quantify these physical interactions. And here, at this slice of time, at this moment in time, when you are about to kick the ball, you can have this slice of time and you can quantify the action that you have performed up until that moment. But then there's still some actions that need to be performed with an environment, which is actually lawful information. How the environment is structured is what actually specifies how you are going to function in that moment in the future. Therefore, if somehow we are able to transform or to put at the same level the energy of the actions that you have taken at the level of information, then you know that by virtue of an information, not by bits of information of the Shannon type, information that is lawful by virtue of these physical interactions, if we're able to put this information at the level of the action, then you will be able somehow to quantify the physical parameters of that particular relationship in that moment in time. And that's a very crazy thinking and philosophical as well, but from a physical standpoint.
I think as long as we're going a little, I guess it's not philosophical what I'll say, but is more kind of, if you think about it from a modeling type perspective, that a lot of times we learn about systems by perturbing the system and seeing that response. And I think that when you have different game plans, it's also a way that you're kind of perturbing the system and kind of seeing how a different game plan affects that outcome. So I think part of it is also, and again, I have not done the sports side, as you saw from my talk. I look at other applications, but in thinking about this just here and listening to all the talks, the ability to even try those different game plans and then to be able to perturb the system and see that response. There are, it seems, different ways that it can be measured, and you can assess that game plan, and it may be that there are different solutions, right? It's not necessarily that everyone is going to come to that same solution because they have different teams and different factors within their team. So I think the question started off as, well, what do you measure? But I think part of that is understanding what the makeup of the system is, which kind of comes back to the more philosophical side that you were saying too.
So you've talked a lot about performance for the team and the athletes, but I presume you have same performance and KPI on coaches and the coaching staff. And do you envision a day in which like an AI baby X trained as a coach would be a better coach than a human coach? And based on your analytics, that could be a future, right? I mean, and we face that future in many other jobs, but would that work?
I would say that I think the answer is that the ability to use the analytics is going to likely be an increasing quality that good coaches have. But I don't think that, I think that the ability to replace a coach is a very different kind of task.
Yeah, because I still think within pro sports there's still so much uncertainty. And when it comes to decision making, and we see you're talking about the San Antonio Spurs and Greg Popovich making decisions on intuition or instinct at times, but very, very good decisions. I mean, I listened to a interview with Tony Strudwick, who was my position with Manchester United, talk about being with Sir Alex Ferguson, and he said Sir Alex Ferguson had some very clear things that when they went back and looked at the data. Alex Ferguson needed 26 players, first-team players every year. That's his exact number. He needed 6 players that the fitness staff had to guarantee could start 50 games that year, right? He had some very clear things that when they went back and looked, it was intuitively he had kind of come across that from seeing the athlete's response to the environment, essentially. And that's, for us, you have cross-country travel and you play a hot game and you come back and you look at your athletes and you're collecting data too, but this kind of response and seeing how your athletes responding to the environment, I don't know if you can replicate that fully.
I think from learning science and from what we're seeing in terms of the way personalized learning is evolving, a lot of the detailed training and optimization will be done, I think, better by machines when we can really personalize. But there's another line of research, like embodied cognition, and some things we're seeing that, like, to learn and to be motivated depends so much on humans. It's very hard to get that emotional and motivational connection. So I think coaches, their role will change a lot. I don't know exactly how, but I think there will be still a piece missing. I don't know how big. Yeah.
Yeah, I think going back to the initial question, I think a baby like what we see, it's never going to change or make the job of a coach in terms of a tabula rasa. It's not possible. Even with deep learning projects, you need to have a minimum knowledge. And I think that even what we saw here from this company, all we saw they were just patterns. They were just points or dots connected. But who connects the dots? And maybe you go to FC Barcelona, and these connections, these dots that were connected, for us, maybe they are not the right thing to look at. So that's why I think that still we're far away from that.
I do think that analytics are going to be better at creating a large picture view, which is currently not present in analytics. So as we move into the understanding of sort of how the overall behavior of the team is manifesting or is relevant to performance, that's going to change what the role of the coach is, because now the analytics are really focused on the details rather than on the overall behavior and overall system dynamics.
So I'd like to thank everyone on our panel for presenting today and for all the questions and feedback from everybody in the audience here. I'm not sure if some people may be around a little bit longer to answer questions and other people have to head out, but you can get everyone's contact information, I'm sure, from...
It's online. It's online.
It's all online. So there you go. So thank you, everybody, to who was in attendance and who was presenting.